Welcome back. Today we are talking about 3, the Empress, and the main portion of this video is going to be an impassioned diatribe because I have a significant grievance with this chapter. But before we get into that, let's talk about what Sallie Nichols wants us to think about this card just in general. From the chapter, I glean that Sallie Nichols poses 3, the Empress, as perhaps an older version of 2, the High Priestess, but more grounded in the material world, and as a representation of the anima, which I have to let you in on something real quick. Whenever I see anything in Latin, so anima or animus, I need you to know it takes all of my willpower not to say anima or animus every time I see those words. And it's not like a funny joke or, and it's mostly an unfortunate circumstance that happens literally every time I see anything in Latin. I need to try and pronounce it in a fake version of Latin. So somebody help the boy. But if you're not quite sure, anima and animus are parts of our unconscious, part of our psyche, at least in Jungian terms, representing the sort of the aspects of ourselves, of our psyches that are male or female. I personally don't believe that there's a reason to make this delineation, and instead we should just think of them as human characteristics. But that's not what Sallie Nichols is saying. What she is saying is that 3, the Empress, represents those more feminine traits and characteristics of our psyche. Our desire to love and to give care, to nurture things, and to follow our intuition. Sort of right brain stuff. As opposed to animus, which is for the Emperor. And that's sort of your left brain stuff. So logic, reason, decision-making, power. And that's a very basic and probably too rambly explanation for anima and animus. But we're getting to the point where I've been talking for a while, and if you've noticed, I haven't really said anything just about 3, the Empress, on her own. It's always been in reference to 2, the High Priestess, or 4, the Emperor. And that is exactly the problem I have with this chapter, is that Sallie Nichols only ever really says one thing about the Empress on her own, which is a departure from how she talks about every other card. It's always in reference to another, which I find upsetting, obviously. Upsetting enough that I wrote this annotation at the end. I think a big issue I have with Miss Nichols' interpretation is the sort of binary dualistic framework she uses so often for 3, the Empress. It seems reductive in the worst sense to boil down this archetype to such a very basic caricature, either the perfect mother or the terrible witch. Especially as such a creative and primal force, I feel that 3, the Empress, has so much more depth to how she informs us on the more traditionally feminine aspects of ourselves. Perhaps this is exactly why Miss Nichols is so stubbornly sticking to this framework, to emphasize how our society has trained us to view women and their domains, and hopefully spark a moment of critical thought about how she represents so much more. Because that's how I feel. I feel like the Empress represents so much more than this idea that woman can be a mother, somebody who is intensely passionate and caring and nurturing and supportive of her children, whether those are physical children or ideas, beliefs, relationships, or that woman is that, or just a hag that lives in a bog in the middle of nowhere and is intuitively working for self-gain and nothing else. No relationships, no nurturing. That seems so reductive and false to me. Because for me, the Empress at her core really represents the opportunity to creatively define what it means to be feminine. And it gives us the power and the chance to define femininity in a way that makes sense for each of us individually. How we approach nurturing and caring and loving and establishing connections with other people, living in harmony with the world around us. And there's a lot more, but I could rant on this for literally a half an hour. One of my other takes was a half an hour. So I'll leave it there. If you have any other ideas or comments that you want to make, please do. I don't feel anywhere nearly as passionate about the Emperor, but we will talk about him tomorrow. So that's pretty much everything. The one last thing is that again, in reference to 3 and 4, 3, the Empress, is a representation of like the mother figure, and 4 is a representation of the father figure. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the Emperor proper. But I have gone on for long enough now. Thank you for listening. Okay, love you, bye!